This time on Poll Hub, religiosity in the United States. A new survey finds that fewer Americans identify with a religion. Why? Marist College Professor of History Dr. Sally Dwyer McNulty joins us to shed some light on the topic. Then, to believe in or not to believe in. Why conducting a poll doesn't necessarily mean pollsters back the topic. We explained in our discussion of advocacy polling. Lee's fun fact this week is one that can really get you moving. This is Poll Hub, so let's get to it. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm Mary Griffith, sitting in for Jay DeDapper today.
And I'm Barbara Carvalho.
And I'm Lee Miringoff.
So we're starting off today talking religion. A recent Pew Research study found that 3 in 10 U.S. adults consider themselves to be unaffiliated with a religion. It seems as though from this study, secularism is booming. We have with us today Dr. Sally Dwyer McNulty. She is a professor of history here at Marist College, as well as the author of Common Threads, a cultural look at clothing in Catholicism. Thank you for joining us, Sally. Welcome to Poll Hub.
Wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me, Barbara.
Well, is it true? Is religion just another institution that we are seeing here in the United States and perhaps globally that we have, lost trust in, that we no longer have as much confidence in, just as we see in other institutions?
I think that's certainly part of it. That there is distrust, and that distrust comes from scandals, for instance, that have plagued organized religion over the past 2 decades. It's been a pretty consistent trickle of bad news. And then there's also the pandemic, which has been more recent, where people have not been able to kind of come together. They have not been able to share the rituals that they often associate with organized religion. So that's certainly part of it as well. And then we also have the kind of the dominance of technology and how technology has really changed the way that we interact with people, the kinds of information that we get about what we can believe in has an influence on religion and the place that it holds in the lives of Americans.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because to me, I would think that this explosion in technology and our ability to communicate with each other in so many ways would actually inspire people to come together in more of a community way. We see in other areas, obviously, that's not the case. But why would technology have so much impact on our beliefs?
When we think about when technology became such an important part of people's lives, the World Wide Web is available in 1995, and we see this decline in religion really with millennials. So Gen X kind of straddles this technology access, this space. We spend a lot of time, and millennials and Gen Z spend a lot of time on creating communities that used to be in brick and mortar buildings are now communities that are online and digital. So that I think has a significance. There's also kind of the variety that's available, the variety of people and groups that you can meet when you're online, and then what the kinds of questions people are asking. So certainly traditional religions, Protestant traditions, Catholicism have moved into the space of social media, but so have lots of other groups. And so, for instance, there's a book by Amanda Montell called Cultish, and she talks about groups that are certainly not religion, but have some of the characteristics of religion: Soul Cycle, CrossFit. So they have not only physical spaces, but then they also have social spaces on social media.
Sally, I'm just curious, what link do you think, if any, does political partisanship have to this decline of religiosity in America?
Well, I think that when we are looking at identifying with a religion, and one of the questions that Pew was asking was the significance of religion in people's lives, and that there was this decline among, but where you see a significant percentage of Protestants who are white and evangelical are Republican. And then among evangelicals who are Black, they are more affiliated with the Democratic Party. And so at least for white Protestants, and you're seeing this decline in people that affiliate as Protestants, there is a disincentive. And because that it appears that they are kind of linking with the Republican Party. And again, people, to bring technology into it, are so present on social media with their identification and belief. They may not want to, advertise that they are religious. So I think that, the Democratic Party does struggle with kind of including people who are religious practitioners.
I thought, we talked before about, before we started the program, about how I'm old enough to almost sound like an historian by just pulling out examples from my youth. But what I was thinking of as you were talking was when John F. Kennedy ran for president, as a first Catholic ultimately elected as president, he had to sort of establish himself as patriotic and owing himself to the Constitution rather than the Vatican by drawing a separation between his religious practices and his role as the leader of America. And then the Republican Party, by the time we get to Ronald Reagan, you almost had to be part of a religious movement to be acceptable within the Republican Party. And I think that really sort of underscores the movement over time.
Absolutely. I think that it is, especially with discussions around abortion, it's very difficult, I think, it would be very difficult for many Democrats to come out and say that they were religious because they associate religion with anti-abortion. And so these topics become conflated, and that makes it, I think, again, kind of a disincentive for religion.
Although I saw in a poll, and I forget whose numbers they were, that
Lee, you're not supposed to say that.
They weren't ours. It was some.
You're citing numbers and you don't know who they were.
The Casey will put them in the show notes. But that now you threw me off my game. No, I remember now that Joe Biden is seen as being more religious than Donald Trump, which I think is a reverse of the party stance. Clearly, Donald Trump was not a regular attender of services, and Joe Biden, obviously, very strong Catholic in his beliefs. So I thought that was sort of a flip of the trend of where we're going. Tell me about the movement towards secularism. Is it just decline of institutional religion, but that people still have a high degree of religiosity, or are we moving the full step to secularism?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that that when we're thinking about attending service, we're thinking about the brick and mortar and the organized religion, that decline is there. And but as far as spirituality, I think you have a lot of seekers out there, and they are doing what Tara Isabella Burton talks about, which is that remix. They are kind of creating their own rituals, their own meaning of transcendence. And so I do think that we shouldn't necessarily, if we're using the word religion very strictly, and associating it with, organized religion, then absolutely on the decline. But if then we open that out to spirituality, we would see probably different numbers, a different picture.
Sally, just one last question for you. There's been this sense in the nation for 100 years or so of the Judeo-Christian morality. Some may call that a bit of a myth. Is this move towards secularism or a decline in religiosity and religious practice a little bit more inclusive? Does that foster more inclusivity in terms of the voices that we're hearing in American society?
I think so. I think that that religions aren't going to just kind of give up, and that they will remain. They are being self-reflective and need to kind of recognize identity and be affirming of people's identity and inclusive. So as the religion kind of reconfigures, I think that we'll see that definitely a trend towards being affirming, and maybe that drop off of secularism may kind of settle a bit
and find another equilibrium.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you so very much, Sally. We really appreciate you joining us today. Sally Dwyer McNulty, Professor of History.
Thank you.
Enjoyed talking with you.
Well, while we're on the topic of religion, we at the Marist College Poll have done some work with the Knights of Columbus for about 14 years now. Now, some have kind of provided us with some feedback, some fan mail, that this is advocacy polling and that perhaps we shouldn't be taking a side, but really we're not taking a side. Barb, why did you weigh in on this?
Sure. Thanks, Mary. It's really interesting because we do a lot of public polling. As folks know, that the Marist College Poll is actually a research center at Marist College, and we're best known for the public polls that we do, particularly those with our media partners, NBC News, Wall Street Journal, NPR, and PBS NewsHour, among many others. But we also do have a private polling side where we do partner with other organizations and a whole host of organizations. However, one of the requirements of us polling with a particular organization is that, first of all, they can't be a political campaign. They can't be a candidate running for office. And they have to be open to the idea of us creating questions that, in our best sense of the science of asking questions, is going to measure what it is they're interested in measuring. And although the example you're giving is the Knights of Columbus, they are a Catholic organization. They are not technically, an advocacy group, but they certainly do hold positions and argue and debate on specific issues. And we have, over the years, done polling with them because they really want to understand what Americans think, what American Catholics think. And from their perspective, it doesn't really do them any good if we are not honest and objective in constructing the questions, because then they're not going to be able to get the answers that will be useful to their organization.
Yeah, and I think that this point is very important because in an era where institutions and pollsters and the media are part of that, are always sort of viewed as, or frequently, I should say, viewed as being part of this broader conspiracy. Not that you can get pollsters to agree on anything, let alone to be conspiratorial. But on this question, I think it's important to understand that, even when you look at the Fox poll, which people see very often as being influenced by Fox News in how they word their questions and do their discussion. In fact, the Fox poll is an independent and objective measurement of public opinion. And so, in a sense, our lift is easier than that because we don't have the kind of like the overarching journalistic direction that Fox News has. But you can be scientific and separate from the ideological predisposition. And I should say, on our polling on things like abortion rights, women's rights, we have methodologically contributed to the discussion by how we define what people's positions are and find out that the positions on that question, for example, are more nuanced and less either or, for, against, an end of discussion. So Mary, I see you want to jump in on that.
Well, just it's something that we mention in class to our students all the time is when we work with a partner, whether it be a media partner or the private side of things, we always reiterate over and over again that we conduct scientific, methodologically sound, unbiased, and independent polling. And I think that's what it really comes down to. So for poll consumers out there, Lee and Barb, who might be looking at a poll and be like, wait a second, hang on, this organization, this polling group is taking a side. What should the poll consumer be looking at to determine whether or not this is down the middle or kind of leaning in one direction or the other?
That's a really good point, Mary, because there certainly are marketing groups and polling organizations that do advocacy polling. They get a client and the client wants to show X to make publicity. And you'll often see these kind of, we call them the 90-10 questions, where the question is worded in such a way that 90% of people, agree and only 10% disagree because obviously, they weren't hearing the question correctly. And so that's one thing you can look at. When you see a survey that has questions worded in such a way that you don't think your opinion could be expressed if you were to answer that question, that should be a red flag. When you see questions that are, so kind of beyond the pale, where, 95% of people think one thing and, 3% think another and the other 2% weren't listening. I think that those are questions that should give you a question mark about the validity. In other words, were they actually measuring what they say they were measuring, or were they trying to make a point? Lee, you did mention that with the Knights of Columbus, we have done an enormous amount of research over the 14 years on the issue of abortion. And that particular issue, as many others, are incredibly contentious, particularly now with the change in the Supreme Court and the cases that are before it. It is a very contentious and debated issue. And one of the things that we have found there, which I think has gotten people to think that we may be on one side or the other, is that the issue itself and Americans' opinions on it is incredibly nuanced. We do see questions and posed where people have to be on one side or the other side. And in that instance, the majority of Americans describe themselves as pro-choice. But then when we ask the follow-up questions, which are more nuanced and give specific situations, what we find is that there's actually more of a consensus between Americans who describe themselves as pro-life and those who describe themselves as pro-choice, and that many of the positions that are thought of as simply pro-life positions are actually positions that pro-choice people agree with as well, and vice versa. So it has been an incredible wealth of data and trend data that we have seen on that particular study and that particular research, which is available from us if people are interested. But I think for organizations that perhaps are brave enough to
risk this, yeah.
Because it's an incredible exercise and an incredible way of understanding an issue that might otherwise go by the wayside as one side or the other.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in and also point out that very often people mistake a badly worded question, and we hear this all the time. People say, oh, that's just a push poll. And that's really a very different way of twisting information than any of this that we're talking about now. The polls very often, which have a leading edge to them, might be a biased poll, might have some kind of advocacy associated with it, but they're still trying to develop a representative sample. They may be looking for message testing. There's still polls. They just may not be questions that would carry the test of accuracy with them. A push poll is actually misnamed because it's not really a poll. So when you see a badly worded question, Well, that's not a push poll. That's just a badly worded question. A push poll is not a poll. It is not a representative sample. It's used very often to have a message that you send out wholesale to an audience, not with the purpose of sampling a small group and generalizing to the larger population. So unfortunately, in polling, we have two terms that are wrong. One is a push poll, which is not a poll, and the other is a margin of error, which is not an error. So
but that's a whole nother discussion.
But I think we need to clean up our lexicon of terms here.
Help us, Ashley. Get us out of here.
I think that a push poll might be a misnomer. Lee, I'm going to push you along, but I'm bumped to your fun fact because it'll certainly help us wake up. Yes,
and in fact, I think we have maybe over-caffeinated our discussion today, but there was a poll that was put done by CBS News in 2019 that our friends at the Roper Center at Cornell University have kept in their archives. And just a simple question of whether people prefer coffee, tea, or don't drink either. A national audience of 1,015 was asked that question. I was a little surprised by the results. I thought coffee would win, but I didn't think it would be almost within the so-called margin of error. But it was 47% on the coffee side, 40% on the tea side, 12% saying they don't drink either. I am a Diet Coke person. That's a different question, but that's a way to avoid what I used to be lots of caffeine. I found I used to teach, guzzling coffee until I would get up to 6 or 7 cups a day, and found that probably contributed to my already hyper disposition.
I am definitely not a coffee drinker. I do like a nice cup of warm tea, usually chamomile when I'm trying to relax. But no coffee, the caffeine thing does wreak havoc on me as well. Although I think it kind of beckons back to my childhood, because when I would visit my grandparents in Portugal, they would serve what was called barley coffee, which is a whole different animal from what we know of here in the United States, and it also has quite a bitter taste to it. So, as a little kid, coffee was always barley coffee, and I never ventured into any other kind of coffee, and just became it.
How many sugars would you have to use to sweeten the barley?
Oh, most of the jar, most of the sugar jar on the table, much to my mom's dismay.
Mary, you have a young child, as our audience knows. And yet you probably have to stay up late at night. Is part of the upbringing baby syndrome to be guzzling caffeine along the way?
I think that guzzling caffeine is a syndrome of working in the news industry and being, before that, a college student, even before having kids. But I am hands down a coffee drinker. I enjoy a cup of tea at night, especially like Barb. I enjoy herbal tea. But there's nothing like a good hot cup of coffee to get me moving in the morning. But I do wonder how these results would change if you threw hot cocoa in the mix, especially in the cold and snowy winter days that we've been experiencing in the Northeast.
I could do that. I could go the cocoa route. Definitely. As I look out the window.
Chocolate's always a draw, especially if you put a couple of marshmallows on top.
Well, I think we've covered the spectrum today, folks. So you can move on, and we'll see. Get a fun fact at the end of the next program.
That'll do it for Poll Hub this week.
Poll Hub is a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer.
Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
The Poll Hub team includes Ashley Marcinik and Marcello Bettman.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, please consider leaving a review. Positive reviews help other like-minded listeners find us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy, our free online learning portal.
If you have questions, tweet them to us at Marist Poll.
Finally, however, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there's a subscribe button.
Click it, and the latest episode will be ready for you in your podcasting app as soon as it's released.
We'll see you next time.